welcome to the third instalment in the Women in Life Sciences Leadership Series. We're joined here today by Natalie Harrell, who is a senior leader within program management within the diagnostics industry as a whole. Thanks so much for joining us here today, Natalie. It's a pleasure to have you. It would be great if you could expand a little bit on what I've just said there, just to give us all a bit of an introduction to yourself and your journey to where you are today.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Emily, for giving me the opportunity to join you today to have this discussion and this conversation around women in leadership in life sciences. As you said, my name is Natalie Harrell, and I serve as the Senior Director for Program Management at Freenome, a high-growth biotech startup in San Francisco. I started my career in medical devices in a very interesting manner. Soon after graduating undergraduate school from UC Irvine, I applied for a temp position with a urinalysis company based in Chatsworth, California. I was brought in as a temporary employee to serve as an executive assistant for the COO. I did very well in the role, and the company elected to hire me as a full-time employee. I worked hard and performed well as an EA to the COO, and I kept getting assigned different special projects and programs. I ultimately outperformed the role, and from there, I was promoted to the program management team within product development, and the rest is history.
Amazing. Thank you. It's great to hear how you've been able to progress to where you are today. As you know, and as we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, this is part of a conversational series surrounding the topic of women in leadership within life sciences, but really the question as to whether there are still inequalities from a gender perspective within the life sciences market. From your perspective, do you believe that, or do you consider that the market does provide unequal opportunities to men and women?
Yeah, I think the idea and theory behind equal opportunities is interesting. Right now, many conversations are taking place around men and women having equal opportunities for the same roles and experiences. And I truly do believe that in life sciences, men and women are offered the same opportunities. But the difference is that one opportunity may be more accessible to men than women. For example, in many large medical device and pharma organizations, one expectation for progression of the career ladder is to take advantage and to take part in rotational opportunities. In these types of rotations, one can learn how to manage different segments and locations of the business with the ultimate goal of possibly running the company as a general manager or a business unit president. And while I truly do believe that both men and women are given these opportunities equally based upon merit and the ability to drive results, the problem lies in that this opportunity in of itself is more accessible to men and much more male dominated.
Yeah.
Women, we may not have the ability to leave our family for 1 to 2 year rotation, in addition to possibly relocating the entire family.
Yeah.
And even if a woman doesn't have a family, there's a higher level of associated risk and vulnerability to be considered if that woman is going to move to a remote location by herself. The burden placed on women on how to take part in these opportunities is much higher than that placed on male colleagues. In addition, I've also heard that sometimes women were not even considered to want to take part in these opportunities because of the different burdens that we have to overcome. So I know that personally, I've overheard colleagues say, oh, well, she wouldn't want that role. Her whole family would have to move, etc. And those are the types of comments and assumptions that just shut us out from even having the chance to take place in that opportunity at all. And another interesting thing, another interesting opportunity that is sometimes lost for female colleagues can be seen in the simple act of male colleagues spending time on the golf course. From top executives within life sciences and even national presidents, we all know that deals and camaraderie are built on the golf course. And as a woman, we are instantly shut out from that because there is an expectation that we don't know how to play golf.
Mm,
And that's just a very prevalent experience that I know many women have faced. And so
mm,
I do know that some of my female colleagues have taken up golf to bridge that gap.
mhm. And this topic of assumptions or expectations is something that we've spoken about before within this topic. And actually, to reference the conversation that came prior to this one with Marissa Cook, she spoke about how it was so often assumed that she wouldn't want to continue her progression up the career ladder because she was building a family at home. You mentioned there that one way that you've seen that overcome, one brilliant way you've seen it overcome is women kind of taking that ownership and learning how to play golf and therefore challenging that assumption. How easy do you think that act of confronting or challenging assumptions is for women?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I mean, there are so many different expectations that are placed upon us in the workplace, and if we do not act in those expectations or in a manner that's aligned with those expectations, I have experienced that is often met with judgment. And so there are different types of judgment that men and women face in the workplace and at home alike. I know I also have witnessed different female colleagues being judged for returning back to work too quickly after the birth of their baby, or if they're traveling too much. And on the flip side, if a male colleague leaves early to go to a school recital, we label him a family man or great dad. And so there's a lot of judgments out there and a lot of expectations and assumptions, and it's really hard for us to, it's not it's not a breakthrough, because I don't know if we're going to break those assumptions, but how do we prevail in the face of them? And I think we have to be deliberate in how we do that.
Absolutely. And you've just given two great examples that show that expectations and assumptions are gender agnostic. They exist no matter what gender you are. But in those examples that you gave, the assumptions are having or impacting negatively on the women and positively on the men, right? They're getting the compliments, they're kind of getting the pat on the back, which shows that those inequalities are still there. And why is it you think that even after all these years of talking about it and all the breakthroughs or the improvements that we've made, why do you think inequalities like that still exist today?
I truly believe that certain inequalities are still with us and still exist because they are hard coded into the workplace and the workplace culture and mentality. And changing that culture and mentality will take a long time. And I've experienced colleagues who are driving for extreme change to happen overnight. And while I wish that that can be achieved, I think that expectation of fast change to hard coded concepts can ultimately lead to backwards progression rather than forwards. And I think for us and women that want to be change agents in the workplace and life sciences, we need to understand that there is both a short and a long game approach. And in the workplace, we have to be very deliberate with the changes that we want to make. I've seen instances where taking a very liberal feminist stance in an organization may not yield the results that are desired, and may in fact have quite the opposite results, branding that female as either too vocal or not focused on the company's mission. And in my experience, once you get that dreaded label, the attention is more on yourself and the person rather than the results within the organization. And it's that type of distraction that can be detrimental to a woman's career growth. So as a part of being deliberate, we have to work together to drive change for our collective goal.
Absolutely. And I would agree with you that teamwork is essential for any type of change, especially change that is so hard coded into society, as you said. To go back again to the conversation I've had with Marissa, it's quite often thought or seen that competitiveness amongst women can create a barrier to this teamwork and can create a negative environment, really. Really, I think that this competitiveness can be perceived negatively, especially with women. And I was just wondering if you kind of believe that to be the case.
Yeah, I think it's very true that, competitiveness exists, and that sometimes within women, that competitiveness can become toxic and can be a distraction. I believe that some level of competitiveness is healthy, and that's what ultimately keeps us driving to get better and to grow. Where I think it becomes toxic is that ultimately when it's a distraction to the results in the workplace. And I have to admit that earlier in my career, I definitely took part in this sort of toxic competitiveness where I, really pitted myself against other females, either in grad school or at work. And I believe, that within the workplace, the only way to get promoted was if somebody was let go or fired or retired or, in other instances, I felt it was necessary to prove that I was, the smartest female in the class, the shiniest, or I had the best ideas or solutions. And while I think that this competitiveness is important, what I came to learn and realize is that my success can be inclusive and exclusive of others' outcomes, and it's not linked. I learned that in actuality, it's better if everyone succeeds and if everyone is the smartest and the shiniest and everyone can deliver to fulfill the company's organizational mission. And as a leader and as a mentor now, my success is inexplicably linked with others. For me, as a leader to succeed, I know that my team needs to be at their best and succeeding as best as they can. And it is my job to help them grow, learn, and become the best they can be.
Thanks so much for your honesty there. I think that kind of self-reflection surrounding the way that we felt about competitiveness and progression, it definitely resonates with me, and I'm sure will resonate with many of the people, women specifically, watching this video. Do you think the competitiveness, as you described it, do you think that sense of competitiveness is more prevalent in women than men?
I actually don't think it is. I think that there is a high level of competitiveness within this industry, both between men and women alike. I think what is different is that when you see competitiveness within men, it's often celebrated as a positive, while a woman's competitiveness is seen as a negative. I know that I have experienced men working themselves up the career ladder and vying for that next promotion, and that's celebrated as hardworking and driven. While if a woman was to do that, there is this expectation of that female colleague helping everyone grow and get better, right? Taking everyone with her. And if she's driven to succeed and wants to work up the career ladder, she may be labeled as cutthroat or self-centered. And so I don't think that there's any difference in the type of competitiveness and the amount. I think it's just ultimately seen differently and celebrated within men, but criticized within women.
And we come back again, don't we, to that idea of perception, and that frustration that the same behavior can be perceived in different ways in women and men. And so, as we've said, one way of overcoming this is to challenge those perceptions and therefore challenge the hard coding, as you put it earlier. How do you think that we go about that?
Yeah, for me, and the approach that I'm taking and that I've seen that is working well for me is really looking at both short and long-term goals, because they may not necessarily be aligned. So, for the female colleagues whose short-term goal is to get that promotion, to be a deal maker, or to sit around the table with the top executives, and that your company takes part in golfing events and that your team builds that camaraderie at the golf course. Maybe your short-term goal is to learn how to play golf, right? It's very tangible. And if your success is tied to taking part within a rotational program to become business unit president, then maybe a short-term goal is to find a support team and find different ways to make that happen within your family and your lifestyle. In short, there's no shortcut to hard work, determination, and perseverance, which is the same for our male colleagues. But I think when we look at short-term goals, it has to be what is tactical and what is tangible. For the long term, I really think that we should look at empowering the future generation of men and female colleagues within life sciences to move not only towards equality, but also towards equity in the workplace. So of course, for certain labor specific jobs like firefighters, obviously we can't change equality. The weight of the rucksack has to be the same regardless of your gender. But for life sciences, I think we do have an opportunity to change some of those mentalities of how can we make the burden for some opportunities less for women and make it more equitable.
Okay. And thankfully, this is thankfully we're not the first having this conversation, and this is something that, as society, we've been challenging for a while now. With that, do you think that any of these old school mentalities have already been challenged?
Yeah, I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic of COVID is that we have definitely changed the old school mentality of being in the workplace in a particular building Monday through Friday, 7 to 6 p.m. I can tell you that for me specifically, before the pandemic, program management was a role that needed to be in the office every day. The concept of having a remote program manager was just very foreign. And so I know that within my organization and within Freenome, we have actually seen that we are producing better results, and we still have engaged the company culture being a remote worker. And so I think that is one old school mentality that we are changing and that we're shifting. And being a remote worker may be more equatable to the women colleagues in our industry as well. So I think that that's one area that has been changed.
And to go around hand in hand with that, what do you think we still need to challenge?
Yeah, I think ultimately one of the things that I would like to challenge and I would like to see challenged is the concept of labeling success. So often, success in our industry is tied around very specific items, whether it's having a PhD or achieving a C-suite role or working 50 hours a week. And I know that I would like to challenge what success means. I think that men and women, we can be successful at any role, and we should be able to define what that success looks like. I know that for me and in my position, I've been extremely lucky, and I'm grateful for the success that I have. But I think that for others and for the industry, I think we should challenge what does success mean? Do you have to be a VP to be labeled success? Do you have to work 50 plus hours to be a successful employee? And how can we link it more around driving results and the value that we can bring to a specific role?
Absolutely. And as you say, that's not a gender specific benefit. By challenging that perception of success, we give everyone access to the pathway that they truly want rather than that they think that they need. And again, we come back to this idea of challenging perceptions. And I think that that is so important. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. As I said there, I think this idea that while opportunities may be equally available to men and women, it's more about whether they're equally accessible to men and women, and how do we change that? It's all about challenging these perceptions and assumptions surrounding women specifically in this case. Hopefully through this series, we've been able to start to challenge some of those perceptions and assumptions. And I know that you've helped me to do that today. So I'm really grateful for that. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you.